Onside. It's Tuesday. It's absolutely freezing. Well, it certainly is around this neck of the woods. Ois, how are you?
Likewise, in every sense. Yeah, it's pretty cold. We went for a couple of lunchtime walks, didn't we, Ayub? And it was pretty nippy then too. But I'm doing good, thank you. Despite my club's recent shortcomings, but I'm sure we'll get into that. How are you anyway? Your team's not doing too shabbily.
Yeah, we're doing all right. We're doing all right. We had a nice little victory at the weekend against Peterborough, Alex Ferguson's lad. Excellent performance and a worldie from, would you believe it, Paddy Bamford,
It
which
was a work.
I'm
Yeah,
sure you've seen that.
it was a worldie, all right. I mean, that's probably the best goal he's ever scored. What do you reckon, Ayub?
He did score. Do you know when we were in the Premier League? He scored a hat trick against Aston Villa,
Yeah.
and there were some crackers there. But this was, in terms of technique, it was absolutely fabulous. Uh, Beautiful control on the chest, swivel, bang in the right hand corner, uh, and that was game over. That was 2-0 game over. So excellent, very delighted, very happy, and thankfully, after yesterday's draw, we've got a home draw against Plymouth, and that was our first home fixture in 13, because the last 13 FA Cup fixtures that we've had have all been away. So delighted that we're home. Delighted we're playing a team that we should be on paper. So I'm looking to progress as far as we can. So all things good at this moment in time as a Leeds United supporter.
Yeah,
Uh,
I thought the way, just very quickly on the goal. I thought the way he took the goal was showed incredible confidence, didn't he? In terms of the kind of one touch swivel, just the arrogance to kind of take it on. I know you didn't take too kindly to some of his post match comments,
I
but
certainly didn't know.
but maybe we should leave that right there. But look, you're in the hat for the next round, home tie. Who knows? Maybe this could end up in a berth at Wembley.
Yeah, I mean, talking about being in the hat, your beloved Arsenal weren't in the hat because they were beaten 2-0 by a decent Liverpool, decent performance by Liverpool. So I mean, that's really what we want to talk about. I mean, this is the third loss on the bounce, which is very unusual for the Arsenal. And I mean, I sort of jokingly sort of said the wheels have come off, but three wins or three losses, and then a loss against Liverpool, and it wasn't the strongest Liverpool side. And uh, at the home stadium of Arsenal as well. So really, I don't know. Is there cause for concern? Talk about the game, because I thought it was a decent game. It was an exciting cup game, and a Liverpool win, which for me obviously is very pleasing. I'm not sure it's the same for you. So talk about the game, but also talk about, as an Arsenal fan, is it really time to worry?
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, the game was a little different to the ones previous. I guess it was not too dissimilar to West Ham, although West Ham obviously they were dominant, whereas Liverpool, as you can expect, will always carry a threat. Which even in the first half, even though Arsenal had much the better of the first half, Liverpool still carried some threat. Could have gone in a goal ahead if it wasn't for Arnold's. Shot coming back off the bar. I think just in terms of the game itself, I'll cover the game first, maybe get your thoughts, and then maybe we can cover the larger picture, which is Arsenal, probably, because they are probably the story to some extent, because this is not something that we've experienced under Mikel Arteta for quite some time. I think it's the first time they've lost three games, I think, in over 2 years or what have you. The game itself, slightly unusual. Arsenal pretty dominant, I would say, in the first half, taking real advantage of some uncertainty at the back. Liverpool's kind of insistence to play out. Arsenal picked their pockets a few times, didn't they? And probably, yeah, should have put one or two of them away. I'll get on to why I think there are some issues there. There's no doubt that the recent results have played some role. I mean, look, the game, are you as much as it is physical, it's definitely mental as well. Yes, you've seen some of the statistics, 60 odd shots at home in the last couple of games, no goals to kind of show for it. But there's definitely Arsenal are searching right now, aren't they? You can tell that there's some of the opportunities that are coming to them. There seems, I wouldn't say rushed opportunities, but they're opportunities that aren't the kind of what I would call in kind of those kind of really cold chances that you get, which you can just kind of smoothly put away at the end of a good move. Everything seems haphazard. Everything seems a little bit frantic right now. It's not slowing down for them. Let me say that. There is some talk about what they should do, and we'll get onto that in a moment. But I think the game itself, look, Liverpool, it's amazing, isn't it? Because they have pretty much made their peace. And this is the great thing about Liverpool. They've embraced the fact that there will be times when they'll be under the cosh, but there is some resolve that you take from kind of coming through those challenging times, knowing that you'll always have the opportunities to score at the other end because you've just got too much talent. And that's essentially what it was. I thought Jota came on and made a real positive difference. It was the first time I saw somebody unsettle Saliba a little bit, and I think we have to give him huge credit for that. Saliba seemed a little unsure in terms of coming short, coming deep. So Jota, I think, is a clever forward, and I thought that worked really well for Liverpool. And then, yes, you've got the artistry of Trent Alexander-Arnold, dead ball specialist, and he put a really good ball in the box for the own goal for the first one. And look, up until then, the game really opened up in the second half. You weren't sure who was going to score that first goal, or at least I didn't. Yes, Liverpool had some moments. I thought Liverpool did shade the second half for sure, but both teams, you could tell, had set out to get a winner, no matter how it came. And Arsenal, unfortunate for themselves, scored an own goal. Again, credit to the free kick taken. But on the whole, I was comfortable with the result. It's a game that Liverpool could have scored. Arsenal were dominant first half. They'll feel like they should have given them some sort of comfort at half time, let's say. And then it's probably a different game, isn't it, Ayub? The confidence that would have come from that. Maybe Liverpool, with the players that they were missing, probably make a few subs, which Jurgen Klopp made anyway, bringing on some of the young lads. But give Liverpool credit. When they stay in games, you know they'll always have some sort of threat. They are not a team that you think, there's not many games where you'll think they're not going to score. Even against United, I know you thought they were a little below par, and maybe that's fair, but I still thought they'd done enough to score a few. Let's be very clear. So there's not going to be many games where they fail to score. Let's say so. Give credit to Liverpool. I think in the end, the game's about goals. You've got to score goals to win games. From an Arsenal perspective, not a huge deal wrong in that first half. What I would say is the game probably got a little frantic in the second half, and they probably didn't have as much control. I thought Liverpool came on strong. So good time, good game, good watch for the TV, for the neutrals. But in the end, congratulations to Liverpool.
Good summary. I mean, that more or less does summarize the game exactly. And I think you're absolutely right about Jota, because I wanted to talk about Jota. I think he was the catalyst in my mind. I think what he has, which Diaz and Nunes don't have, is the intelligence. He's very, very smart. And I think with Nunes and Diaz in the first half, there's a it's almost they're spontaneous players rather than sort of clever players. I mean, there was one move where Diaz Jota was actually pointing to where he wanted the ball. Now it seems quite straightforward, quite simple, but even that in itself shows to me a certain intelligence that he's exactly pointing out, right, that's where I want the ball. And he certainly, you're right, he gave problems that I don't think the others gave. And really, to me, he was the key. He sort of controlled. There was an element of control that came when Jota sort of came on. Another sort of standout player to me was, and he is getting plaudits and rightly so, Konate. I think he's been outstanding. He's just getting, he's a player that every time that I see him now, he exudes leadership, and he makes timely challenges. I mean, there was when Martinelli came on, he absolutely did Trent twice. But the man who saved him twice was Konate, and I think it was the first half. You're right. Arsenal were irresistible to a certain extent. Certainly, maybe I suppose in the final third, that's where it let them down. But they were closing, they were harrying, they were hungry, and they looked. It almost resembled the first game that they played, where for the first sort of 15, 20 minutes they were the dominant side. But the concern is, I mean, you pointed out the stat: 60 odd attempts. And what is it? How many goals? One goal in that?
Well, none in the last two home games. Yeah.
Right. Well, that is a cause for concern. I mean, it's I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you're going to explain what you consider potential solutions to be. Is it a striker? Is it as simple as that? They have a striker, and then all the problems dissipate. Is that what you think?
I mean, I think this answer has some layers to it, and I think it's not just one thing. I think it could be a lot of things. So I'm gonna kind of lay it out, at least how I see it, you, but I can only speak for how I see it as opposed to how other fans see it. I think on the macro point, there's been a little bit of I guess it's depending on which tabloids you read, but there's been a few negative headlines about Arsenal. Who are they going to go for? Mikel Arteta obviously having to um, manage expectations of the fans. What I would say is, first and foremost, you've got to be careful. Arsenal don't have an entitlement or entitled to win the league. What they have, I think, what they should be doing is best endeavouring to challenge for the Premier League title. And I think most observers would still say right now they're right in the midst of it. It's a very
Hmm.
close run thing. We're pretty much at the halfway mark, but there's no time to panic, I would say, in terms of writing anything off. You've got to get back on the horse and ultimately perform. You prove yourself out on the pitch. So I think what I would say is that's the first thing. I think you don't want to go overboard. We don't have an entitlement just to have a consistent run of games where we're winning every football match. Arsenal, for the most part, in the last 18 months, or you have had it good. I mean, yes, they've not won titles, and I'm not saying we should be happy with that. But let's be very clear, there are other clubs who would be more than happy to be in Arsenal's position, not just in terms of in the league, but just generally where the status of the squad is, the manager, and all the rest of it. So that's the first thing. So I'm quite calm about where we're at. The other thing is I don't think necessarily that is simply just a case about dipping into the transfer market. And let me explain how. Arsenal have been more than supportive, the board has, in Mikel Arteta's kind of rebuild. And I think Mikel Arteta has repaid that as well, because you see a team that's competitive all of a sudden. I don't think the solutions are always about, right, who can we buy? First and foremost, they are quite tight when it comes to the FFP rules right now. So I don't think they can do anything without bringing in some sales. What I would say is that they probably don't sell as well. I think over the last couple of years, they could have sold players at decent value. I remember Emil Smith Rowe being having a bid from Aston Villa. I think it was about 30 million, was rejected at the time. Yes, he's had some injuries since. I think if Arsenal had their chance again, they would have sold him. So it's about realizing players' value and finding the right time to sell, isn't it? That's just as important.
Yeah.
So I think there's some things there. So I don't necessarily think it's always an outside solution. I mean, Tony's going to cost a lot of money. Brentford are probably not going to be wanting to sell in the January because they are struggling right now. They are in a relegation battle. So I don't see the value. If you look at Brentford, I think they are the number one in the Premier League in terms of players missing for injuries, long-term injuries to Mbermo, Kevin Shard. So they're struggling up front in terms of personnel. So why are they going to give up their asset for 80 million when Premier League survival is worth probably just as much, if not more? So for me, I don't think he moves this January. I would be actually quite shocked if he moves. Do you then go out and get another player? But then you're thinking, well, why are we buying just for the sake of buying? Is that player going to guarantee to deliver you the Premier League title? So for me, the solutions lie within. I'm comfortable with that. The only thing I would say in terms of, just very quickly, because I want to get your thoughts, what you see with Arsenal as well, is there are some underlying issues which we've spoken about previously, which have now just started to rear its ugly head. I don't think they have the same balance on the left-hand side that they do on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, they've got a nice triumvirate, if we can call it that, with Saka, Odegaard, and Ben White. And although Ben White varies his game, some games he's overlapping, some games he tucks in, that's still a very quality side. They build up Odegaard and Saka very organically on that side, very nicely. However, Martinelli's missing Xhaka a lot this season. You'll notice that he's often isolated on his side. There's no one really taking a player away or playing close to him to play quick 1-2s like he had Xhaka, who's got a very cultured left foot, let's not forget. So quite often, you mentioned earlier about Kanate coming across. He's often having to face that kind of second player who's coming across him, quite often because the players on his side, Havertz is either playing off the strike or making runs, or Zinchenko who's tucking into midfield. So there's not that natural foil, let's say, for the left winger. So there's some issues there. And I think genuinely their ability to build the play through the thirds has not been as smooth as it has been, let's say, of previous years. You remember last year they had Xhaka, Odegaard both operating between the lines. Yes, Odegaard's a more cultured player, but Xhaka also has the ability to pass very effectively on the floor, 20 yards, 25 yards, very comfortable in possession as well. So I think they're just missing that link on the other side, and I think that's just upsetting the rhythm, the speed at which they play. They've been a little slow and a little ponderous. I think they're second only to City. City do it the better than anyone, I would say. But they've also got a monster up front who can put pretty much most chances away. Arsenal quite don't have that. Look, again, I don't think the issues are vast and plentiful. I think it's a case of work on the training ground. They've got a couple of weeks. I think they're flying to Dubai for some winter training. I don't think it's crisis mode. I think the solutions lie within some work. I think it's more about the type of chances. I'll give you one example. You saw against Liverpool, Ayub, when the ball falls to Havertz for the chance where Odegaard ends up hitting the bar. Even there, when he passes to Nelson, he's just kind of passed it to Nelson in his path on the right foot. If you're given a nicely more cultured pass, maybe it gets to Nelson. Nelson can put it away. But because it's just not well thought out. It's not executed. You saw his first touch for the other chance he got. It's off. There are some technical issues with the ball striking also, I feel, in the final third. But on the whole, I think there's a lot of good things there. I actually think it's the quality of opportunities that they're perhaps not creating as well as they previously had. So how that fixes, well, that's why Mikel Arteta gets paid the big bucks. He wants to win Premier League titles up against two incredible managers. That's ultimately what you have to put up with. But again, I don't really go overboard. I think Arsenal have the opportunity to fix the issues. I think the solutions lie within. They were a good football team a couple of games ago, sitting atop the Premier League title. So nothing's gone vastly too wrong. I think they just need to get back out there, a little bit of confidence, build some confidence with a few, let's say, results. They've got Palace to come, I think a few other games as well. And I think there's no reason why they can't get back up into that kind of confidence mode and challenge for the Premier League title.
Very well put. I think that's and you make a really good point about sometimes it can be misleading. You've had 60 opportunities. Maybe it is the type of opportunity. I mean, if it's a gilt edge opportunity that you're missing, then maybe I suppose you can say, well, look, there's something not quite right about the forward players who are not able to finish great opportunities. I think you're absolutely right. If I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be looking at the performance now, albeit you've not had the results. What would perhaps concern me is that what you don't want to do is give anything to your arch rivals. Now, Liverpool obviously are the arch rivals. To have played them 2 games at home and to perhaps have played for large portions of the game better than the opposition, but to really only end up with 1 point in the league. Obviously, you've lost in the cup. That's the concern, because really it's that those are the games that you really want to almost maybe sort of set a marker just to say, well, look, we're going to be competing, but we've got probably the edge on you. At the moment, I've got a feeling that Liverpool are probably thinking that we've got slight edge on Arsenal, and I think that perhaps is more of a concern. But in terms of general play, I've got to say that in terms of the way that they play, I've got to say that Arsenal are probably the better side in terms of football. They're much more sharp. I mean, in terms of the triangles, I mean, I was actually commenting with my boys when I was watching that they were. It was pleasing on the eye. It was really slick. Certainly in the first half, Liverpool looked a lot laboured when they were moving forward, whereas Arsenal was sharp. Everybody seemed to know what each individual's role was. I think Liverpool grew into the game, and it not having Salah is a massive miss. Even if Salah's not playing well, there is something about Salah. It's almost your gun play. He's there. He's capable of doing something, and he always attracts the interest of the opposition. I think with Arsenal, there's enough quality littered around the pitch that I think you're always on your toes. You're right. I think anybody who's sensible isn't going to panic. Anybody who's sensible and really is aware of how the game is played is not going to panic by thinking, all right, we need somebody. You're right. The solutions are within. My only concern is that I don't know whether they've given a little bit of advantage to Liverpool in these 2 games, that they've not been able to. Maybe the when you're in the ascendancy, they always say when you're in the ascendancy, you've got to score, you've got to make it count. That probably is the concern for me. That when it's mattered against the big team, have they got what it takes to give the knockout blow?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and I think a good ending point as well. Because to your point, they started really well against Liverpool at Anfield, and not quite able to see the advantage home. It's one thing taking the lead at Anfield, and yes, you're going to feel the pressure. It's Anfield, it's Liverpool. They've lost 1 game all season, and even that was in controversial circumstances. So ultimately, you know you're going to come up against it. But to your point, can you deliver that knockout blow? The City game was meandering to a 0-0, right? And then a deflection and Arsenal get the win. That's slightly different, isn't it? I don't think Arsenal were in the ascendancy for most of that game. Second half, maybe a little, but not to the point where you said they thoroughly deserved to win the game. I thought they were the ones slightly pushing. So there's different dynamics to each and every game. I think we have to give Liverpool some credit. They stayed in the game, yes. They rode their luck a little bit in the first half. Arsenal started pretty fast, but give Liverpool credit. They were without Van Dijk. They were without Salah. Yes, Arsenal were missing one or two players as well. But the point is, there's something about them because they've been there, done it, and won big trophies that you just feel as though they feel confident that they will always score. There's something to be said. It reminds you obviously of the Ferguson era. Very rarely would they just have a game where they just didn't score. You'd always felt they'd score goals, even when they're below par. And I think this Liverpool team, and I think it's a conversation we should probably have, that what does it mean if Klopp wins the Premier League title with this team? I think the team's great, by the way. I'm not setting it up as though he's got a below average team, but how does it compare in terms of his potential achievements, especially at Liverpool Football Club? But yeah, give Liverpool credit. Look, they're a top team. They are atop the Premier League. Arsenal don't have a divine right to win these games. Were they competitive? Yes. Were they competitive at Anfield? Yes. The league's won by being consistent over 38 games, and right now Liverpool are more consistent than Arsenal, and I think we should, give them their due.
Yeah, I think Liverpool are just finding ways to get a result. They're finding a way to win games of football because in terms of personnel, I certainly thought that Arsenal were much the stronger side in terms of the personnel. Liverpool had injuries, they've got absentees, so they were there for the taking, and maybe that's probably what Arsenal will sort of look at. That we played well for large portions of the game. We had, I think, a better side, but we ended up losing at home, which is perhaps the most alarming thing. But certainly from my point of view, and you're absolutely right, there's no reason to panic at this moment in time. So Arsenal fans, what are you thinking? Put a comment in. I'm not sure if there is any Arsenal fans apart from you. Oh yeah, Wahid is an Arsenal fan, but he doesn't often put in comments. But according to OS, nothing to worry about. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on to the next story.
Let's move on.
Right. This is something that we discussed. Myself and always discussed about including on the podcast. It's a controversial subject. Oh, it's certainly the individual involved is a very controversial character. He does polarize opinions. It's Mr. Joey Barton. He's been in the news. He's made comments about women in punditry, women commenting on men's football. He's of the opinion that they shouldn't, that they're not equipped to comment on the men's game. That's Barton's views. What are your views?
I'd like to hear yours first, Ayub, if I may, because let's hear your thoughts. You're right. He's been in the news a lot recently, hasn't he? In the last 4 to 6 weeks, talking about this. You framed it, I thought, very well. What's your views, Ayub? Does he have a point? Do you agree with how he's making his points? What's your view? Firstly, on the subject matter, because I think there has been some growing noise about female anchors, broadcasters, analysts, pundits, whatever you might say, in various different roles within, let's say, the broadcasting side of things. What's your overall assessment?
A glib answer would be I have no issue. And I've always believed in meritocracy. If somebody is best equipped to do the job, you do the job. When there's an agenda, and that maybe is where I think Barton is coming in, and to a certain extent, that's my view as well. I think what I'm not in favour of is doing what some of these media networks are doing. It's just it seems to be there's a, I don't know whether it's a directive, whether it's an agenda, but I certainly think there's a number of broadcasters, pundits, and I'm talking about men and women, who I feel are not fit for purpose. I think in terms of what Joey Barton said about women and commenting on the men's game, I think he's got an absolute valid point. He's got an absolute valid point,
Which is
that you have to, as a pundit, you're supposedly an expert. You're supposed to give us an insight. In theory, it's something that you've experienced. And I think there was somebody who made a really good point. They said, well, if that's the case, then when it's Champions League, the only players that should be there are players that are played in the Champions League. I agree. I absolutely agree. If you're a presenter, different story because you're a presenter. But in terms of punditry, what I want is an insight from somebody who has experienced it. And I am inclined to go towards the way Joey Barton. And maybe I'm going to express it slightly differently. But certainly what I want is from the pundit to give me an insight based on experience, first-hand experience. Now, there was always going to be an exception, but on the whole, that would give me an awareness, an insight, perhaps that I wouldn't get from somebody that perhaps has not played at that level. So I think he's making a valid point. There are too many people, I think, at the moment. I'm going to use phrases that I really don't like, but I'm going to have to use them. It's the political correctness. That's what it's woke. It's almost forcing upon the viewers an agenda. I have absolutely no issue, as I said. To me, if it's the best qualified person for the position, absolutely fine. That's the question that we need to ask. Are most of these women pundits, women presenters, are they the best available? I think they're not. I don't think they're giving me an insight into the game that perhaps I would get a better insight from somebody who's obviously been there, done it, and perhaps has a much more of an insight into what the feelings perhaps would be. So at the moment, that's my opening stanza, as you would say. What's your thoughts? And then obviously we can discuss.
The character involved. Yes, maybe we should. Look, you're right. This has been very much in the news over the last 4 to 6 weeks. I try to approach these topics or these subjects, and I think to myself, does it move me? Does it have any effect on me? And I think this is just a long list of unfortunate stories in football, in sport, and to be fair, in life in general, about looking to make let's say noise for the sake of whether it's clickbait, views, or whatever it is. Now, I'm not questioning Joey Barton's intention. These might be the views that he absolutely holds, and more power to him if that is the case. We fight for liberties and freedom of speech and all the rest of it. So I don't have any issues, to be fair, genuinely, with his ability or his right to share these views. Genuinely, I don't really care for it. It's fine. Have at it. It's about how, I guess, we receive these comments and what our reaction is that we have to manage. Me personally, I think the issue that Joey Barton has is that he's talking about something that's definitely been more and more present over the recent years, and it's probably more in the last 18 to 24 months, right? Where we've seen more and more, let's say, female influence within commentaries, analysis, analysts, pundits, and what have you. What I will always do, however, is look at exactly what he said and see if he's right, in my opinion, or wrong. And I think when you comment on Thursday, as he did, about the two female pundits, or one pundit and the host, and likens them to Rosemary and Fred West, he's going to lose not just me, but he's going to lose a lot of people. And this is the challenge that I often have: is that when you are sharing whatever message, opinion, or thought that you have, which is your absolute right, and I would always fight for that right, no issues whatsoever, you need to be mindful about the language that you use, and any analogies or examples, or however you're going to use it to get your message across, because ultimately his message was lost. Now, I don't agree with his message generally anyway, but I think when you're comparing to serial killers, the likes that this country hasn't seen, I think ultimately you're not going to be seen. You're going to be seen as a caricature, and most people are going to see it for what it is. So I think that's where most people will be lost. There's some other comments attributed to him that you just cannot agree with. It's just too much. It's too far. He's crossed the line, right? So for me, I'm going to take his general point first. So I'm not going to give him the benefit of the way he's put those points across, because I don't think they've been fair and I don't think they've been reasonable. Do I see it as too much of an issue? Honestly, genuinely, but this is just my own thoughts. I don't. Only because I don't listen to footballing pundits for their insights anyway. There's many a male pundit, an analyst, that I don't often find informative nor educational, and that's just my own. That's not me being a snob. It's just that I don't listen to the analysis for that reason. There are often times when Sky Sports will have a five-man table of, let's say, Dave Jones, in previous times, Graham Souness, Gary Neville, Jamie Carragher, Roy Keane, I'll be thinking this will be good 25 minutes for you. And just because it's the characters involved, and Souness will often, you kind of know where he's going to come from, what Roy Keane, maybe after a tough United defeat. So it's also a bit of entertainment, but there's some heavy hitters there. And it's interesting just to hear their views. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing. It's just so I'm more inclined for entertainment, let's say, to watch something as opposed to perhaps being informed. Look, all the analysts, there's definitely been more and more analysts, female analysts, being put on the major broadcasters. Sky Sports have Karen Carney. I think they have Izzy Christiansen. She's actually one female pundit that I do like listening to. She does make some astute points. But that's not to say I don't like listening to the others and think, well, they're not cut out for their jobs. It just has no effect on me whatsoever. Good or bad, it's just, it is what it is. More power to them. But you've seen it on BBC Sport, TNT Sports. Laura Woods now heading the coverage for TNT Sports. Again, I think is this clearly a drive and various channels competing with one another and a clear directive? Yeah, because that's pretty obvious. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Is that because of the successes that the England Lionesses have had in the last couple of competitions? Perhaps, perhaps not. I don't know. I'm not privy to it. I just think ultimately, when you're making such a point where you disagree with that move, I think that's fine. That's okay. I think you have a responsibility with your words to be mindful of the language that you use. And I think Joey Barton crossed that line quite a few tirades ago, and that's why it's difficult to side with him on this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's Joey Barton for you, isn't it? Really, he's always been a controversial character. He's quite inflammatory. I mean, I don't know whether he does it for effect or whether, I suppose, it's clickbait. But it's a tough one, this, because you've got to be so careful. We live in a time where you're constantly walking on eggshells. You're always careful with what you say, especially in the world of social media as well, because a lot of comments are recorded, documented, and then they're thrown back in people's faces. I'm football to me has always been. I mean, in terms of the women commentators, pundits, there is a thriving women's game now. So it's not as if there's shortage of employment, shortage of work, shortage of opportunities. But mine is slightly different. It's almost in a sense old school. Football to me is it's like when lads go on a lads' night out. It doesn't mean that these are sexist chaps. It just means that there are some times where it's a sort of a sort of thing that you do as a group of males. Football was always like that to a certain extent. It was sort of back in the day. It's a sort of thing that maybe there was a group of lads got together. I suppose if there were wives, girlfriends, they'd just say, "All right, we're going to leave you to it." In a sense, it was our space. This was our moment. This was our little world. And I don't know. There's a part of me just sort of thinking that and again, it's difficult because you've got to be so careful the way that you phrase it, you word it. But it's not sort of so that these individuals have a disparaging sort of view on women. It's just that it's a domain that is considered to be, I suppose, the man's game is the domain of, I suppose, the males, and that's part of, for
Yeah,
me.
but at the gates, they don't see, oh, you're a female, you can't come in. You got females watching the games as well.
Well, yeah, but in terms of numbers, I mean, I'm not sure what the demographics is, but certainly for me, that's part of it. It's not the total argument, but that's part of it. But in terms of the punditry, I genuinely think that there's an agenda that the media companies are trying to force upon the audience, and that's what I don't like. I think if something happens naturally, absolutely fine. I mean, in cricket as well, we've got she's a commentator. She presents as well. Alison Mitchell, excellent, really, really good. Issa Gulher as well, very, very good. So but Alison Mitchell has been on the scene for a long, long time, and it was almost, there was a natural evolution. She came onto the scene, and she's part of the especially the radio broadcast, and she sort of fits in wonderfully. So again, there is a part of me that if something happens naturally, I have no issue. But when the media companies try and sort of force the agenda, that's when I have an issue. I have got, as I said, it's not just on the females, but there's males as well. There are certain pundits that I consider completely inadequate. They're therefore maybe a reason that I don't agree with. So certainly I agree with part of what Joey Barton's saying. And I certainly do feel that in terms of punditry, there has to be something that you're bringing to the party. It's either that you've got exceptional footballing knowledge, or you've played the game at the level that you're commentating on, or you're talking about. That's where I've got my issue. I think a lot of these girls have never played, obviously, at the level that they're commenting on. They may have played at international level in the women's game, but the men's game is completely different. Completely different.
Yeah,
So
but if I'm playing devil's advocate, you could say the same for management, right? Arsene Wenger didn't play at any type of crazy footballing level. Yeah, he's one of the best managers this country has ever seen. I say the same for Jose Mourinho, maybe even Jurgen Klopp. Yes, there are some who've made good managers by being what I would call good football players. Guardiola being one of them. If I can say the same for management, then why can I not say the same for a pundit? The point about the
it's a
pundit
fair
point.
point, and it's a difficult one to counter. I've got to say, it's a difficult one to counter. Maybe with a punditry, and this is a personal opinion,
Mhm.
with the punditry, what I want, if it's a Champions League game, I do really want players that have played at Champions League level. So maybe it's something that perhaps Shearer, I won't listen to him too much, but I certainly want to know the insight. If it's how do you approach a Champions League game? I want somebody to sort of say, well, when we played in a semi-final, this is what we did. That really is what pundits are there for. They're giving you an insight into something perhaps that you would not get from somebody else. So
It,
certainly that's what I would expect, which is where maybe some of the arguments for Joey Barton are.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I then hear a pundit talk about, yeah, when we played Juventus in the semi-final or what have you, I'm thinking, why does this pundit or analyst have to make it about them? So we see football completely the other way. For me, punditry, analysis, whatever it may be, honestly, I can choose to adopt it. I can choose to avoid it, and that's what I would say to anyone. Ultimately, if you don't want to listen to the pre-game show, I often don't. To be honest with you, I often tune into most Arsenal games on the kickoff point. I sometimes listen to the commentary. I'm sometimes too absorbed to even hear it. So my point is, you can consume it if you want. I think these are first world problems. Honestly, you can change the channel. Yes, I agree with you. The one concession I would make for sure is that there are more and more female analysts. I don't feel any type of way about it, but there is the case over the last 12 to 18 months. Like I said, is that because of the Lionesses' success? Is that because they're all kind of looking to make sure that whatever it is, fighting for audience, viewership, all the rest of it, whatever it may be, TV companies have their own reasons. They pay big bucks for these TV rights and have to find ways to kind of recoup some of that investment, whatever that might be. That they have their own strategies. My point is, ultimately, we as a consumer have a choice because, yes, you might say, well, hang on, I don't want to be watching my games in silence. Yes, that might be unfortunately the
Mhm.
only choice you have. But I think I genuinely, this is my own opinion. I don't think this is a male female issue from a quality perspective. Ultimately, if you want to be informed and you want to be educated, there are perhaps in every sport, to be honest with you, but I mean this in every sport, there might only be one or two quality commentators that you actually like listening to. Me and you and I have discussed this many a times. The late great Shane Warne. When it's a cricket studio, when you often have a rain break at TV cricket with the cricket, and you've got in the good old days you had Gower, but let's say you've got whoever you have now, but then they sat with Hussein and Warne. You know that's going to be a
Yeah,
quality
yeah.
30 minutes because they're both incredible orators in terms of their ability to articulate, but also incredibly experienced. They really bring light to a subject. I've watched the Shane Warne documentary recently
Mm.
as well. So what I'm saying is, in every sport, there are people you gravitate to because you either like listening to them, you like their opinions, or you like the way they form certain opinions. Whatever it might be, it might just be their powers of articulation and what have you. So I just think it's like that in every sport. Football, there's not many pundits that I like listening to, genuinely. It's not that I like or dislike, it's more uh, I, they don't really bring anything extra to whether it's my own analysis or whatever it may be. That's no discredit to them. They might not like listening to me or you. So it's just, I think you get that with every sport.
You
Joey
you
Barton,
say you say that you get with every sport, but you've just touched upon a sport where I don't think it is the same. Because in cricket, I mean, it's almost my sort of default setting. I always go to cricket, but there's a reason why. Because again, it's a sport that I absolutely love. You know, I love cricket. But the commentators, you look at current crop of commentators and the past commentators. You've got Lord Gower, Bortham. You've got Nasser Hussain, Michael Atherton. Sort of Richie Bennett. All of these are former international players. A lot of them were captains. When you get guest pundits coming on, you've got Kuma Sangakkara coming on. So it tells you something, that these are what they're looking for. Is obviously there's a certain caliber of pundit that they're bringing on. These are usually guys that have been there, done it, and performed to an exceptional level, because they give you an insight. Now, obviously, with cricketers, they seem to be much more articulate. They're able to sort of obviously express their points in a much more engaging way than some of maybe the footballer.
Yeah.
But again, that is, I want to watch not just the game, but there is, and I'd like to know exactly what the viewers would want, because isn't that the case sometimes, that don't just force feed the audience, let the audience decide what they want. So I'd love this for there to be a poll, and to ask the audience, right, do you want women pundits, women commentators in the men's game? And I'd like to know, because certainly when I've been reading the comments underneath the Joey Barton on social media, a lot of the comments are supportive of Joey Barton. Now, I mean, maybe there are some some sexist lunatics there, but there is a legitimate point. I think he has made a legitimate point. It's something that I, in part, agree to, and I certainly would. I mean, but mine's a little bit more layered than that. I think I've never been a huge fan of Sky. I love the coverage in terms of what they're doing in terms of showing the sports, but what I don't like is the agenda. I think their agenda is very, very geared towards introducing a lot more women into the men's game. I don't think it's based on ability, talent. I'm sure there are pundits out there. In football, perhaps there is a dearth of decent pundits, but certainly I think there are a lot better pundits than some of the women that are coming onto the show, and that's my objection. They are there not because they're great pundits, but because they have an agenda they're trying to force down the audience's throat.
To be fair, that's most institutions, not just in sports. That it's often agenda driven, as we currently see in the political landscape as well. Look,
Yeah.
Couple of points that I want to make. I think, firstly, each sport has its own unique relationship to commentary. What I would say is cricket, you mentioned, right? Often the game goes through many kind of phases of, I wouldn't call it malaise, but let's say it's a 5-day test match. There's a lot of air to fill, if that makes sense, right? There's cricket, or it's a long partnership. There's not much happening. The ball's not deviating, what have you. You know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
It's often the reason why they sell the Sky Sports commentary earphones, right? Which often many many viewers, many fans will be holding. They'll often speak to them, or not speak to them, but they'll say, "Give us a wave." Give us, Bumble used to, but well, it's not two-way, is it? But he'll often say, "Give us a wave," or what have you, and there'll be some interaction there. And it's all part of the entertainment, isn't it? So I think cricket has a very unique. It's a unique sport where I think the ability to articulate, the ability to make sound, long points, have conversations, lots of fun, actually. Quite often, the commentary box is where it's most entertaining. You mentioned a lot of them, but a few others as well. Mike Holding, many others that you actually think about that. You know what? I'm actually going to sit through this commentary stint because it should be quite entertaining and what have you. Sky Sports did that wonderful feature of introducing third man, which I thought was quite informative as well often. So look, I think so that's the first thing. I think different sports have different relationships, whereas with football, it's quick, often high octane, a lot of entertainment. It's different. We talk about the Sergio Aguero goal, Martin Tyler's commentary and analysis, other punditry moments, Roy Keane when he's sometimes slating. These are moments that go or held in quite high esteem, or go down in not in history, but you get the point. Like these iconic moments when it comes to commentary. I think the only other point I would make is I genuinely still don't think this is a female male issue when it comes to pundits. I think there are just some pundits, so you genuinely that. Some have the ability to articulate themselves in a way that's interesting. I think one also underrated pundit in my eyes is still Jamie Redknapp. There's often times where he's still quite direct. He'll tell you what he sees. He'll tell you how it, comes across. You remember when he famously took on Jose Mourinho, didn't really back down, stuck to his guns. But ultimately, it's about those who make points that make you think, interesting, okay, interesting take. And there are those male and female where you think, that doesn't necessarily move me any much. I don't think it's even a criticism. I think some are really good at what they do, the ability to get in and out of conversations by making salient points. Some perhaps not so much. Ultimately, some of them, to your point, and I know who you were referring to, a certain Mr. Richards, but there are some who perhaps bring the entertainment angle. And to be honest, he is often quite entertaining. So I take it for what it is. If you want sometimes deep analysis, quite often you'll find it in the tabloids, in the written word, sometimes, depending on where you are looking or where you're reading. It ultimately depends what you want, what you like, what your tastes are. In-game pundits or halftime assessments, post-game assessments, not for everyone. And I think that's fine as well.
All right, okay. Well, that's your views. I've expressed, I think, my views as well on the subject matter. Joey Barton obviously has his as well. I always ask the
He'll have
viewers as
another
well.
one in a couple of days.
He
Don't
probably will
worry.
do, actually. Yeah. But the viewers as well. Those who are watching, what's your thoughts on what Joey Barton said about sort of women pundits, women commentators, and generally women in the men's game? We'd be interested to know what your thoughts are. And on that note, I think what I'll do is I'll ask for the usual stuff before we sign off. So please smash a like, share with your friends, do all the good stuff. We've got a Twitter account as well. Join that. You'll always get some good stuff on there. So that's our thoughts for today. We'll be back probably towards the end of the week. We've got a truncated Premier League program, but there is some games going on. So we'll be back towards the end of the week. So until then, stay nice and warm. It is getting colder. We are going to hit a cold snap. So make sure if you've got, like me and OS bald heads, that you're putting hats on. We made the mistake. Well, I certainly made the mistake of not putting a hat on midday. And my goodness me, I've got brain freeze. So I'll make sure I'll be wearing a hat from now on. All right. So until the next time, stay safe. Look after yourselves. Ta-ra for now.